It's pretty subtle because the input signal is pretty low. But what you can see here is this plugin has 8 filter bands, both in bass and treble, mid frequencies. So they're spread out. And if you use it in stereo, currently it's mono, but if you use it in stereo, see what it does. Can you hear it? Like it spreads it out left, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the bass frequencies on the left side, and you have the mid frequencies on the right side. I'm gonna drive this up some more here. You know what? You guys probably loud enough now. So what you have here is, if I set it to this one, we basically have an equalizer.
That actually got really loud for some reason, if you want to turn it down just a tad.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of the difficulty with this pedal. The original also had that. So what you have is really 8 different filters that are like combined and summed together to create the final sound. So as you start stacking them, it can get loud. So this is the one pedal that sounds by default a little bit lower than the other ones. But that's because you can have these 8 filters stack on top of each other. So once we're here, what we can then do is, what if these frequencies here, so I just moved these up and down manually. What if these individual filter bands are turned off with a pattern? So pattern 1, that's why you see this here, animation is disabled. Pattern 1 allows you to use it as an equalizer. And if you switch it to pattern 2, now you have a pattern editor, or you can use the built-in patterns where as it steps through the steps, you have the individual bands that start getting activated, and you can go in and edit it yourself and like add different steps to it. But let's listen to this pattern first. And you can dial in the envelope. So you hear, now it's basically stepping through these filter bands based on the tempo of your project and giving that animation in the background. There's some things you can do, is like making the peak a little bit more pronounced. This was not in the original. Or you can have different envelopes that you can dial in. The envelopes here are basically, there's 32 predefined envelopes that it morphs between. So as you try to find what works for you, it's kind of good to sort of go in and see, okay, which one corresponds to the movement that I want to create. Right? And now I can still go in and say, well, actually, this band, I don't want it to have as loud. This band, I also want it quiet. So you can still tweak what tonal makeup is of what is being animated by this pattern.
That is such a cool effects plugin.
It's so inspiring. Once you get started with it, it's sort of super addictive. So let's see here. We have 775 in the bass frequency, right? Which is here. So let's just... So you hear this one. Hear it? That is that resonant filter that is now being animated on each step. So each step will trigger that envelope. And based on the attack and decay settings in this morphable envelope knob, you get the animation that corresponds in sync with your project tempo based on what you've dialed in here. Now, that is just the beginning. What you can then do, and let's try another pattern. Like, I don't know them all by heart, but look, this is kind of a wild pattern. But there's one, and I think it is
so cool.
Going back to the subharmonicon. Let's see if I can find that one.
Speaking of the subharmonicon.
Yes, so this one here. This is actually a polyrhythmic pattern where the length of each frequency band is one more than the previous one. See that? So 1.8K will be on every step. 1.2K will be on every other step. 775K will be 1 out of 3, and so on. So you can dial in polyrhythmical filter envelope sweeps, or whatever you call it, based on this pattern editor. So the original MuRF had an external editor you could connect over MIDI and like use that on the computer. We've built that in here, so you basically can just tweak at your heart's content. If you select a number here, you will get the original pattern that was inside the original MuRF, right? And just to highlight that, you can still edit them. So even though there's presets, you can make any pattern you want. Just getting that out of the way. You can set any length you want by right-clicking or left-clicking to toggle on and off, right? So yes, we have presets. Look at all these presets. So each plugin has between 20 and 30 presets, off of which a lot were created by Lisa, by the way. So Lisa spent many months with these plugins, made her album that is currently the first album on her Bandcamp page, and a lot of the sounds she made for that album ended up becoming presets in the plugins.
Nice.
We have like these factory presets. Some people don't like to use factory presets, so we came up with this. Like, I thought this was such a clever idea that our designer came up with, Steven Petoniak, where what if we just add a little switch where you can show or hide factory presets? And that sort of solves the whole problem of multiple menus with different type of users and factory presets. I always get lost. Here's like, if you want factory presets, they're right here. You know which ones they are. They have a little F. And if you don't, then you can only see your own custom presets.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I like that a lot. I tend to just get sucked into sound exploration, so I don't use presets that much. Even though I made quite a few here, and everyone in our team made quite a few, you can also find, like, if you go dig up the original manuals, we did put the original presets that were written out in the original manuals in here with settings that correspond. So we actually went through and tried them all out. You have these little navigation buttons, obviously, right? But then what else you got here is this little switch, and people often wonder what it's about, and it's a compare switch. What it does is, let's say I loaded this sound. I have no idea what it will be like. Let's maybe switch to, well, no, just stay in here. What am I doing? Okay, so I've tweaked this, right? And now, instead of having A-B where you switch between two presets, what it does, it temporarily shows what the last preset was that you loaded. So you can go back, and it's also the last preset that was loaded from your DAW session. So if you load up a session and you want to continue tweaking and you want to compare it with what it was when you saved your session, you can just toggle here. So I think that's a really cool feature.
It's like an A-B, yeah?
It's like an A-B, except that you can't change the B. The B is always going to be what was last saved. So you have only one thing that you're tweaking. Personally, when I have an A-B preset system, I always get lost. I never remember which one was which. Like, I just tweak, and then it's like, was B the original one, or did I already switch to B, and was it A? Like, I get lost. So we decided to do it this way. There's some other plugins that do that. Metric Halo is not very well known, but they have plugins that have the same thing. So it's a different way of doing it. I think it makes the workflow a little bit smoother. Because
it's
you
just
always
like
know.
When you bounce audio, a lot of people are don't like to bounce audio because they think they might want to go back. And sometimes that's like the dark hole that, like, you just keep going back and then you're never satisfied. So I kind of, having the sort of limitation is actually helping creativity in the end. I dig it. Totally agree.
So we have this little drop-down menu here. You can call up the init preset, which is what it will be at when you instantiate the plugin. You can save it in your own custom name. And this is one of my favorites, actually, is you can save the preset to your desktop. So I can do export state and just save it here. And now, let me just call up this other preset. And I have this preset here. I can actually drag and drop on it, and it will load that file. So if you have a cool thing you dialed in and want to share it with a friend, you can use the presets of the plugins independent of the DAW that you're using. So imagine someone, because you can use Logic's like save preset functionality, but then there will be Logic presets, right? Someone else using another DAW, they will not be able to load it. Using this system, you can actually have any preset you create you want to share with a friend, you can export it out, export the state, and then send that file over, and they can drag and drop it on their plugin and have them exactly the same way, even in another DAW. I think it's pretty fun. So let's slow this down. So the MuRF also has an LFO that is not as pronounced in the original. So what we did was, in the CV inputs, you can connect a DC coupled signal, which is a DC coupled signal is basically, you can imagine, you can think of it as like 10 on the amplifier scale. It's just like a full-blown signal doing as much as it possibly can, right? So if I dial this in, I can actually increase the LFO amount. And now you hear the LFO come in and out. You hear it? So what the LFO does, it will sweep again over all these filter bands based on the speed, and the speed of the LFO is linked to the rate here. Hear it? So this is sort of another example of a neat little feature that's that DC input. Now, why did I want to bring this out? Not only is this, you can use this as an additional knob, so now I have an additional knob to dial in the LFO amount, but this knob can be automated in your DAW. So if you look back at that controls list here, and I scroll down, here, CV LFO amount, right? Which is this knob. You can MIDI map the knob and then use a foot pedal with it if you want, like a MIDI foot pedal. And then you can control the plugins in real time with your foot pedal as if you would be plugging in an analog foot pedal in the original analog pedals, which was a very popular way of using them. Little call out here, if you see these little chain thingies, that is, if you're passionate about gain staging, some people are, you can just click this and it will automatically reduce the output or increase it based on the input so that you don't accidentally overdrive your gain staging.